everyone, Jen here. I'm the founder and executive director of the Muddy Pug Farm and Sanctuary outside of Maple Valley, Washington, and I am coming to you from the greenhouse, which is one of 3 new spaces that we have created on the sanctuary so that we can fulfill our mission of building community as we kick off a new partnership with a local domestic violence survivor support and prevention nonprofit. We're going to be hosting group therapy sessions as well as teen domestic violence prevention classes on the sanctuary starting this summer. But for today, we will be continuing on in our discussion of the fabulous book by the team at the Cloven Heart Farm Sanctuary called One Day I Want to Have a Farm Sanctuary. And we have progressed into chapter 2, which is titled Migraines and Mayhem. And we will be going through a segment called Mean People Suck. And boy, do they ever. How is it that as a farm sanctuary, you come across mean people? And I will own that I was very naive as I started off in the work of the sanctuary, thinking, gosh, like this work is so incredibly meaningful for me personally. We're helping farmed animals who have been abused, neglected, or abandoned. We are helping to give them their best forever life. How could someone possibly be mean to a nonprofit farm sanctuary? Oh, my friends, let me count the ways. So just like in any other area of our lives, the sanctuary is no exception as a place where you will experience all manner of haters, people trolling you, people sending you nasty emails, leaving you nasty messages, and even being like overtly combative with you. In this particular segment, what we want to do is to share our personal philosophy on like how and where and why do we experience people who are hating on us? What do we do in those particular situations? And also just some things that you as an individual and then you as an organization alongside your board or other people that are working within your organization can do to minimize the impact of the inevitable mean-spiritedness that you will be treated to in the day-to-day running of your sanctuary. So let's kick off, shall we? So the first thing is that yes, you will need to build a bridge and get over it and get through your 5 stages of grief, that this is something that you are going to have to deal with. And it's not a matter of if, it really is a matter of when. And from my perspective, like when you know that something is going to inevitably happen, Mama is a compulsive planner, and I find it incredibly helpful not to necessarily like circle the drain and think of the worst case scenario, but if I know that there is like a problem coming at the sanctuary, I'm going to think about like, what is the nature of the problem? How can I minimize that impact of that problem? Is there anything that I can do proactively? Is there anything I can do as the problem's unfolding? Is there anything that I can do after the fact to mitigate the impact to me or to the sanctuary? And so I view this like topic of mean people suck as something that I can anticipate and I can proactively manage for in some specific areas and some respect. We'll talk about like how I manage through as it's actually happening, and then the aftercare, what you can do when you've experienced someone who is terrible to you. So let's talk about like the main places where you are going to experience this in your travels. And you will not find it surprising to learn that the place where you will most frequently encounter mean people is on my arch nemesis, the social media. And I don't know what it is about social media, but it is a place where people feel incredibly empowered, because they are sitting behind a keyboard or on their phone. There is a relative sense of anonymity. almost no consequences whatsoever for people to say all kinds of crazy, weird things, either, on your sanctuary page, sliding into your DMs, or figuring out what your contact information is, as has happened to us, and just send you the craziest shit that you'll ever hear. The first thing that I think about as I think about, engaging in social media is I recognize that I am not going to be able to control anything that comes my way through social media. I think my philosophy extends even a step beyond that I am not even going to be able to control my first reaction to some of the crap that people send me on social media. But what I do have control over is I have control over how we as a sanctuary and how I personally choose to engage with social media. And then I also have a choice over what my first action is in response to something that happens within social media, or just my general travels when someone is being really rude to me. And so the way that I look at social media and I think about how we engage in social media has really evolved over time. And when I first started working social media on behalf of the sanctuary, I had no strategy whatsoever. It was just like super willy-nilly, whatever random posts I had. And as we have matured as a sanctuary, with much credit to Miss Anna Smith and her social media wizardry, we have gotten a lot more strategic and intentional about our social media presence. And we have made some definite decisions about what we are willing to do on social media, what we're willing to do as a sanctuary, what I am willing to do personally, as well as thinking about what is the story that we want to tell and how we want to engage with the public in social media. The reason that we do this and the reason that we've really put some thought into this and tried to be intentional about it is because I am also very much a believer that the way that you show up in a situation or an environment helps to determine what that other person's response is going to be, and it also helps to sort of shape the discourse of any particular conversation. And I am not saying that to suggest in any way that someone is begging to be bullied online, or that someone is asking to have someone send them inappropriate things. And it has been our experience that because we have been very thoughtful and intentional about the kinds of things that we post on social media and the online presence that we want to have and the stories that we want to tell, I feel that we have done a decent job in minimizing the level of negativity in the discourse of the presence that we have on social media. So our framework, shocker that I would use that word in one of these videos, our framework for social media is that we are very intentionally resident focused. And we do that because our work is focused on saving lives, giving sanctuary, and building community. And so as we think about what we are trying to portray in our work and social media in terms of what we are trying to communicate and share about the work that we do on social media, we really want to make sure that the content that we are sharing out rolls up to that master thesis of this is our mission and this is what we're here to do. So I know that there are sanctuaries who post all manner of things, and for us, that works. We feel that posting content like that is authentic to who we are. It is authentic to the fact that I want to maintain a reasonable level of privacy for myself. I really want the focus to be on the residents and the work that we do around helping our residents. And I also want to be sure that we are keeping the focus on our residents, and that I'm not sort of building this cult of personality about like me personally. And so I really just try to like take a step behind the lens, and to make sure that I am putting the focus on the residents and the work that we do. I thought Arlo had run away, but he's just sleeping right over there. As a sanctuary, like, you will be shocked to hear this recommendation from me, but as you are starting your sanctuary and as you are thinking about like what does our online presence look like, it is very important, and I would highly recommend that you slow down to speed up, and you are very intentional in conversations like within you, with your board, with any other like interested parties, to have this sort of like guiding principles of, this is who we are as a sanctuary, these are what our values are, and this is how we are going to show up in social media. And I would say, like, you can range as a sanctuary. The dog barking. The dog barking. Arlo! Hey, come here. Hi. Oh, my dog, I love you so muches. I love you so muches. Are you gonna guard everything? Well, hi, most beautiful. And it is not to say that you cannot choose to be like very forward and very advocacy oriented, and to highlight some things that might be perceived as very controversial or even combative, all the way to, you know, you are going to decide to tell your story by focusing on your founders and the work that they do. I am here to tell you that there is no wrong answer as you think about what you want your social media presence to be and how you operate. My only kind coaching, as I say in my day job, is for you to really think about, like, are the things that we are putting out on social media really supporting our broader mission and sharing the stories that we feel we need to tell, to share transparency in our work, or to create an avenue for fundraising, or create awareness on a specific topic or issue. And as long as you are making an intentional decision to do that, namaste, my friends, go forward with the universe. I'm also going to share an example of a wonderful nonprofit and sanctuary in our community, the Old Goats Home, which is run by my wonderful colleague Rebecca. And Rebecca, I don't know how she does it, because they have many, many residents, but somehow she finds the time not only to highlight like multiple individual resident stories, but Rebecca also uses social media as an avenue to just provide general education. She has like an encyclopedic knowledge around farmed animals, especially goats, and the information that she shares, because of the incredible knowledge that she has, is a place that she has like intentionally planted a stake in the ground in how she wants to show up. So like, I love reading her posts. I find it, you know, super informative. The information that she provides is really informative, and that just sort of like carries forward who she is and how she rolls. So, you know, an ounce of prevention is certainly worth a pound of cure. And if you are someone who, like, you feel like, I really want to try to minimize the level of conflict, of like combativeness, then there certainly is a general way to do that, by how you decide to take a step forward into these different platforms. Having said that, I want to be very clear, and we have also experienced it ourselves, that there are going to be times that, despite your best efforts to show up in a way that is authentic or kind or compassionate, you are going to have someone who acts like a complete jackass to you, and that is just going to be unavoidable. But I think, like, for yourself, if you can hold your head high to say, look, like, I stepped into this space aligned with my values, with my sanctuary's mission, vision, and values in mind, then like, as long as you feel good within yourself that you did everything you possibly could to show up in a way that invited dialogue and not diatribes, that's all you can hope for. So what do you do when someone does show up like a complete jackass? And we have experienced this, again, like, I wouldn't say that we have experienced this to like a crazy large extent, but the people that show up and are purposefully and intentionally mean to us, they fall into a couple of different buckets, and the team at Cloven Heart touches on a couple of those as well. First, and I would say most frequently, is you have the non-vegan, I love to consume animals and I have no shame about that, trolls who will drop a comment or send you a DM or make fun of the fact that you're vegan or you're advocating for animals. And it's any manner of comments like, oh my God, I just couldn't live without cheese, or gosh, like, but bacon though is so great, or all the way to people who will write like long diatribes about how many animals are killed when the vegetables that vegans eat are harvested. And like, that is something where our philosophy in dealing with stuff like that is that no one ever completely changed someone's general philosophy or way of thinking about a topic as important as what you eat over the internet, in a social media platform, in the comment section. So those comments that you get are intended to needle you, to provoke you, to get you to react in a certain way. And our philosophy is that, look, like, we are not going to change somebody's mind in the comment section. And so what I do is I just delete them as I find them. I don't want them to appear alongside stories that we tell about the work that we do. So as soon as those comments come in, we delete them out of our social media page, and we just like try to monitor it closely and just quickly and efficiently remove those off of our social media. And I guess for us, the reason that we do that is, like, we don't want to expend the time and energy, and we don't want that kind of negativity. Like, this is our social media channel, so I get to manage what is in the social media channel for the sanctuary. And if I don't want that in the social media channel, Mama's not gonna leave that in the social media channel. So, like, recognize that you don't have control about that stuff coming in, but you also cannot control your first feeling. Like, it's irritating, it's annoying. I don't even want to express how I feel about people who understand what happens to animals in agriculture and they make the choice to eat animals anyways. But, like, you're not going to change hearts and minds on social media. So, you don't have control over the level of irritation and upset that you feel about getting those trolling comments, but what you do have control over is what's in your dang social media feed, and you can decide to ignore, delete, block, whatever, to protect your peace, which is the most important thing. The second area where we deal with some meanness, and it is like one of the most challenging areas at times that we receive kind of snarky comments, is around things related to fundraising. And I have dealt with this in a very odd way. Like, I've been very vocal that I have a very rewarding career that I love very much in the insurance, and I have received not necessarily directly on social media, but like people will slide into my DMs. I've had people actually say this to my face, that because I have a career and a decent paying job, that I am taking money from other well-deserving sanctuaries when we fundraise, which is like, that is just a very interesting point of view, that a founder or someone that is working in a nonprofit is somehow undermining other nonprofits by doing fundraising, and that the expectation is that that person who is in charge of a nonprofit at any given time, if they do have other sources of income, that they should not be allowed to fundraise. And that's just another area where like I'm just like, I don't really care what you think about that. I would like to fundraise. I don't think I should have to pay for this entire enterprise myself. We are a registered nonprofit that runs on the up and up, so I feel very empowered to step into the space of fundraising without having to apologize to anybody else for the fact that we fundraise. So like just the manner in which you fundraise, or the things that you might do to generate revenue for your sanctuary, is it is going to happen. It is going to cause people to ask questions about you or to make comments about what you do. And again, like what I would recommend, my favorite word in these conversations, is if you and your board have decided on your like revenue and fundraising framework, and that is aligned with your values, like other people can just fuck off, honestly. Like nobody else should have a say in what you do to fund this sanctuary. If someone has a problem with how a sanctuary is funded, they can go start their own damn sanctuary, and they can raise money however they want, and they can leave you alone. So again, just like protect your peace and move along, and you can make sense for yourself of like why you do what you do in the fundraising department. The next area where you will often find yourself like getting comments, and especially the Monday morning quarterbacking is just like off the chain, is when you have a specific resident health issue or a resident emergency, and this is a place where you will be the unwitting recipient of like so much, I believe, kindly intended advice or questions or requests for updates, or people who are seeking to understand like how you made the choices that you did, especially if ultimately you as a sanctuary made the choice to help a resident transition across the Rainbow Bridge. And this is a place where I can 100% empathize with people who really feel like they are on the defensive, that you feel like you're under a microscope. I can totally empathize that it might come across like someone's attacking you if they're questioning something. And the reason I can empathize with that is, as a sanctuary, there are few instances or situations on the sanctuary that are more gut-wrenching for you than when you have a resident who is gravely ill and you are just like racking your brain and you are doing everything that you possibly can to talk to your vet, to talk to other sanctuaries, to do your own research, to try to find a path forward. I can say this almost universally of every sanctuary that I personally know as a peer. We are doing everything we possibly can when we know there is a resident with a health issue. We are doing the absolute best that we can with the constraints that we have to ensure that that resident meets our own framework of standards of care. And if the resident appears not to be able to have a good quality life, then all sanctuaries have some type of framework that helps them to come to that decision to help the resident transition across the Rainbow Bridge. And the reason that those questions can often be so very hurtful and damaging to you as you are running your sanctuary is not surprisingly, like, these are incredibly emotionally intense situations. You feel a deep sense of loss. You are generally running on fumes emotionally, financially, physically. And so like that loss takes sort of an even higher toll on you when you lose a resident. And I can truly empathize with sanctuaries who, as they receive those, like, well, why didn't you, and couldn't you have, and you should have, it's really easy for you as a sanctuary to just kind of spiral downward as you are already dealing with that loss, to go into a very dark place. And again, like, I completely empathize with that, and that is a very like normal reaction to somebody lobbing all of these things at you. The way that we have dealt with that is the first and most helpful action that we take is that long before a particular resident is facing a health issue, sorry, I have an itchy in my eye. Long before a resident has a serious health issue, like, we already understand what our framework is for resident care, and we understand like what are things that we do for kind of low grade interventions, what are we doing for mid-grade interventions, like what do we do in the case of an emergency. We have an emergency fund set aside for resident care if something really goes sideways with their health. And so we have tried to like build in as many buffers for ourselves as we can, so that when that situation happens, like, we know what to do, who to call, what we're thinking about. And the most important thing that we have as our North Star is, at what point do we make the compassionate choice to help a resident transition? And that way, you know, when emotions are running very high and it's very difficult, we can kind of refer back to this like anchoring framework to kind of press on and make the decisions, sometimes make the very hard decisions that we need to as a sanctuary. And we also feel like we can then turn to people who ask questions that, from my perspective, they tend to be very kindly intended questions from people who are generally invested in our residents and the work they do, and they just want to understand what happened. And we can then educate them on like what happened and why we made specific decisions and what the next step is or what's transpired. And for us, like, that helps to take down the emotional volume, and it also helps us to just operate in a way that for us feels very above board and transparent. And we have not often faced situations where we've had someone kind of come back with a lot of questions or critiques about what we've done. And again, I think it goes back to that like initial conversation of the way that we sort of prepare and step into these conversations invites people to meet us in those conversations in a way that tends to be a little more productive. The other area that we receive a lot of like, oh, you should have, you know, people like shoulding all over us, is when we have events. And holy cow, like, one would think that opening your doors to the community would be such a like positive and wonderful experience, and 90% of the time it is. But then we also have situations where someone turns to us with just like a running list of everything that we did wrong in a particular event. And I'll share one that really sticks in my mind. Is we were having a Halloween event, and I think some of you know, coming off of Pug Pride on the sanctuary in June, like, we have events where we partner with another nonprofit, the Church of Pug, because we are the Muddy Pug. We love to support the Church of Pug, which is the largest pug-related rescue in the Puget Sound, and we were gonna have an event called Pugs and Pumpkins. And honestly, like, Lord help me, this event was like flawed and challenged from the beginning. It was happening during a time when, looking back, my marriage was probably at its most challenged and darkest and difficult, and I decided to like proceed with this event because it was a commitment that we had made that we are going to continue to do these events. It was like the next fall event. And I think sometimes for myself, and stop me like if this sounds familiar for those of you who have survived through abusive relationships, like sometimes you feel like you have to keep this air of normalcy and just sort of like press on and muscle through it. And for me, like, that was a huge mistake. That was a huge mistake because I definitely was not like in the mental space to put on an event which takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of positive energy, which I really found myself lacking at that time. And so, like, I didn't have time to really put it together well. I didn't have a lot of time to post about it or to manage like invites and to advertise that event. So we didn't have a lot of people attending. And when we've had other pug related events, like, we usually have a great turnout. There was almost no turnout. And so I reached out to the Church of Pug and I said, hey, like, it's not panning out. And the Church of Pug, God bless Shelly, like, she had a view into what was going on in my personal life, and she was incredibly gracious about it. So we canceled that event. And then someone made the choice to slide into my DMs and to share her perspective that this event would have been like so much more successful if we had not focused on pugs and we had opened it up to other dog breeds. Like, that would have generated more interest. And when I receive comments like this, and this was from somebody that I knew in the rescue community. So I really tried to like assume a level of positive intent. And whereas if it was someone who like from the general public had provided that feedback, I would just say like, oh, thank you so much. You're probably right. Like, we'll take that feedback for next time. I responded to this person and provided like a little more detail about what happened, and then that it was an event to raise funds for the Church of Pug, and that's why we restricted it to pug breeds only and their people. And I think she said something to the effect of like, well, your event wouldn't have failed if you did something different. I was like, whoo, Katie, bar the door. I just remember in that moment thinking like, what the actual fuck? and I think that's where and I am not saying that this was this person's intention, but I definitely crossed into a space mentally where I was like, oh, hell no. And I just said, look, like, I got a lot of stuff going on in my personal life. I really don't need you to talk to me this way. I get to make a decision about these things related to the sanctuary and events. I made the decision, and so this is just the way it's going to be. And if you cannot provide constructive, kind feedback, then you don't get access to us to have this kind of dialogue. And that is just for me, when I feel like someone sort of crosses into a space where they are saying something that I have no desire to continue to listen to. The dog barking again. So in that particular situation, and this is like something that you are going to have to deal with, I am a huge fan of telling someone, you don't get to talk to me that way. Period. End of story. For any reason, I'm going to tell you that you have crossed a line. I'll quote the Big Lebowski, across this line you do not cross. But you get to say like what your window of tolerance is, and if someone like goes beyond where you have said it's okay for them to go, you should feel 100% empowered to just thank you very much, fuck off, shutting you down, block you, protect your peace, do whatever it is you need to do. Don't feel like you have to debate or defend or apologize, unless of course you truly did something wrong. But for me, having an event with the Church of Pug and only inviting pug breeds was not actually doing something wrong that I needed to apologize for. So like, again, like as I have said in prior videos, the work that you are going to undertake in the running of your sanctuary is going to be so grueling at times that you do not want to expend one additional iota of energy on people who are hating on you or negative to you or poking and picking at you. Like, dude, as my doctor would say, life is too long actually to deal with crap like that. And when you are on a sanctuary, like your days are too long, your life is going to be too long to allow that kind of crap into your bubble. So protect your bubble, protect your peace. The last area, and probably the absolute most traumatic place that people will come after you as a sanctuary and be belligerent and rude and terrible and rotten to you, is shockingly when people are coming to you because they have an animal that they need to surrender and you find yourself at capacity and you have to say no. And as we talked about in our prior episode around no is not a 4-letter word, you should 100% feel empowered to say no to anything that you want to for any reason that works for you. Like, even if you are not at capacity and you feel like taking on a resident is not going to be good for you or for your other residents or for what you have going on in your sanctuary, you can and should say no, and that's okay. And you don't have to apologize for that. You will feel bad about it. I just know, like, I feel bad when that happens. You will likely feel bad when that happens, but it is something that, like, you can stand strong in your judgment and you knowing what is best for you and you knowing what is best for the sanctuary. But this is an area where people are shockingly mean and they will be so upset and combative and say, you know, terrible things to you. You'll be called 4-letter words. You'll be, you know, they'll post that you rejected them and that you weren't willing to help them. And that is a place where, like, it is really hard for anybody, including me, to say, like, oh, like, that's just water off of a duck's back, that just doesn't bother me. That really sucks when that happens. And if that has happened to you, like, I am so sorry that you have had to deal with that, because as a sanctuary community, as a rescue community, we are like the line of defense for helping this just mountain of unwanted animals of all shapes and sizes and species that people just throw away and don't take care of. And I know that I am doing the best I can. I am sure that you are doing the best you can to help as many residents and animals in a way that is responsible and safe for everyone that's involved. And it is so troubling and heart-wrenching. And I honestly, like, I think what's so hurtful about it is it really flies in the face and goes to the heart of like who you are and what you have chosen to do in this work. And it is something that, you know, someone who doesn't know you, who doesn't know, like, hey, I've just spent the last 36 hours with a sick resident, or we just had a resident pass away, or hey, I actually took in 10 animals today and I don't have any more capacity for you. But somehow, like, those people who are so negative and combative and mean, just like, I could totally get how it really gets under your skin. And that is where I wish I could remember the name of the woman who says this all the time, but it is just like let them. So if someone says that you are not holding true to the value of your sanctuary by taking in a resident that you are over capacity for, or you're not going to accept, like, let them. If you have someone who's going to call you every name in the book because they want to dump an animal and you're not willing to accept it, let them. This is where, like, this is one of the harder things that we have to do, and it is a way to, like, be protective of yourself, be protective of the sanctuary, be compassionate to yourself, be compassionate to the residents that you already have on your sanctuary, to recognize where your limits are and that it is okay for you to say no. And when someone then turns deliberately and intentionally mean and rude and belligerent, that is a statement about them and their values and how they roll, and that has nothing to do with you. Like, I could imagine that they feel desperate. I could imagine they feel like they maybe failed this animal that they are supposed to be responsible for. I'm sure there's a lot of shame involved in that, which makes people do all kinds of crazy shit, but that is not your problem to solve. And, like, feeling okay that you can say, like, I'm really sorry, I have compassion for you and your situation, and that can be true. And it's also true that I cannot accept this resident right now, does not make you a bad person or an ineffective person, or means that you are not doing great work. And that is, like, that's one of the toughest ones for you to, like, get over the hump of, like, how do I manage my own inner dialogue through that mean situation. So, you know, as we've kind of talked through, like, all of the different sorts of situations that we've experienced, I think the last sort of thing that I would like to impart is how you deal with these situations is to have just, like, a level of self-awareness. I hate using the word triggered. I love to use the word activating, though. So I can say that for my personal experience, like, as I was growing up, I was made fun of all the time. Growing up in school, I was bullied all through school and made fun of. And for me, like, people being sarcastic and shitty and criticizing me, like, I have done a lot of work, but that is also something that I find very activating. And I know that about myself, and I have, like, done the work to figure out, okay, these are, like, the signals that my body sends me when I'm starting to get really spun up or activated by something that someone is saying or doing. And I would just encourage you, like, all of us, well, actually that's incorrect, many of us that come to the work of a sanctuary are coming from our own traumatic background. So, like, we have had challenging childhoods, we may have come out of abusive or difficult relationships, and we lean into this work because, you know, we are rescuers, and a lot of times, like, you know, we can also benefit by focusing on that work of rescuing and healing ourselves, and to just be very aware that when someone's, like, coming at you, to just take a step back and to think about, like, what am I feeling and why am I feeling that way? Like, what do I think it says about me that I'm starting to get activated in this way? And is this really like a me problem, or is there some other reason that this is very like activating for me, and how can I cope in a way that's healthy for me? Where I think people get really challenged in dealing with like the day-to-day friction and meanness that sometimes happens in this work is they just dive right in, and they're ready to step into the ring and go to the mat. And I can totally understand that impulse of like, I am going to fight to the death over this thing. And I would just ask that this is where you and your board sitting down to talk about like, how are we going to show up as an organization when these things happen? Because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But to think about like, what are we gonna do when these things come up? Like, what is our sort of different levels of responses of what we're willing to do and engage in an organization? And especially like as an executive director, you are so often the face of the organization, and like, it's odd and you know, for better or worse, because you are the face of the organization, like sometimes people will go after you personally. And this is where like having your board support, having the other broader organizational support for yourself is going to be incredibly helpful as you navigate these tough situations. So much empathy for all of you. Like, if this has been your experience, I would so be interested to hear like what you have dealt with, and how you have effectively navigated these situations. Like, what rings true for you? What are things that you have found that have been effective? Because we all sort of bring our own things to the table in these situations that really inform how we react and how we move through them and try to manage them effectively or not so effectively. So that is what we know about this conversation. I want to, as always, give a huge shout out to the people that support us in so many ways. We have people who donate to us on a regular basis. We have people that sponsor individual residents, which is so incredibly helpful. We have our wonderful group of volunteers that show up and help us in the day-to-day work of the sanctuary. I would be totally up a creek without our amazing sanctuary coordinator, Amber, and I just cannot thank everyone enough. Like, this work, I am the person who is standing here presenting, but there is like an entire group of people who stand alongside me to do this work and to support our work, and I am so incredibly grateful for each and every one of you. Please join us as we dive into our next segment next week with so much love from the Muddy Pug.
I know where you are, and I'm coming to carry you home.